Who needs to see the new Jurassic Park when FGO is already bringing the best dino home to you? Hello everyone, Sobroni of G&A Reviews here, bringing you a servant spotlight for your favorite prehistoric waifu, Kijyo Koyo. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers of how to utilize her effectively and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. So if you're ready to tame this T-Rex, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so that you can catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up, and you can help out the channel. And now, on to Kijyo's stats. Kijyo has a max HP of 11,250 and a max attack of 9,177, which becomes 10,094 due to her Berserker class modifier. Compared to the other Berserkers at her rarity, Kijyo has one of the highest health pools in her class, but also one of the lowest attack stats. Still though, her attack is about average for an SR servant, while her HP falls on the lower side of the spectrum. When it comes to her command cards, Kijyo has 3 hits on her quick card, 3 hits on her arts, 3 hits on her buster, and 5 hits on her extra card. She has an NP gain rate of 0.85% and a star rate of 4.9%. As a berserker with a triple buster deck, Kijyo's NP gain and star generating are inconsistent, but still good compared to most other berserkers just due to her hit counts. Overall, Kijyo has a much more defensive-oriented stat spread, which is unusual for a berserker. Taking a look at her skills, Kijyo's first skill is Shapeshift Dinosaur rank C. It increases her own defense for 3 turns between 20 and 30%, and increases her own star absorption for 1 turn between 3,000 and 5,000%, both depending on level. Her second skill is 9-Headed Dragon's Fire rank A. This skill increases her quick and buster card effectiveness for 3 turns between 20 and 30%, depending on level, and it also increases the overcharge of 1 ally by 1 stage for 1 time or 3 turns. And finally, her last skill is Rope of Life rank B. This skill recovers the party's HP between 1,000 and 2,000 depending on level. It also removes 1 debuff from the party and grants the party instant kill immunity for 3 turns. As for her passives, Kijyo has Madness Enhancement rank A, which increases her buster card effectiveness by 10%, and Magic Resistance C, which increases her debuff resistance by 15%. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Kijyo has a buster deck with Quick Arts, Buster, and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Momoji Gadi. It's a single target buster attack that deals damage to 1 enemy with a modifier between 600 and 1000% depending on level. It also inflicts burn on Kijyo as a demerit for 3 turns, but increases her attack for 3 turns between 20 and 40% depending on overcharge. Kijyo's mat requirements are thankfully a lot better than her collab counterparts. For Ascension, she's going to need 15 Fangs, 5 Chaos Talons, 8 Black Tallow, and 4 Dragon Scales. Fangs can be farmed at Deming in America, where they have a 61% drop rate. Chaos Talons have a 20% drop rate at Des Moines in America. Black Tallow drops at the Northern Cliffs in Agartha with a 20% drop rate, and Dragon Scales have a 12% drop rate at Nipper in Babylonia. For skill leveling, she'll need 8 Talons, 30 Fangs, 20 Giant Rings, and 8 Mirrors per skill. The Giant Rings have a 40% drop rate at the Giant's Flower Garden in Lost Belt 2, while the Mirrors drop at the Rear Mountain in Shimosa, where they have a 12% drop rate. I gotta say, Kijyo is one dino that I wouldn't mind being stepped on by. Although with stats like hers, Kijyo seems more like she'll give gentle head pats than stompings, because she has one of the lowest attack stats among all SR Berserkers. And while her HP is very high for her class to compensate, as a Berserker, high HP unfortunately doesn't amount to much. And with a triple buster deck, Kijyo is definitely not a winner in the stat lottery. But as I mentioned in my Voyager review, stats rarely give the full story. For that, we need to analyze Kijyo's skills. Her first skill, Shapeshift Dinosaur, is a variation on the Shapeshift skill that not only gives Kijyo a defensive buff, but also a big boost to star weight. From a defensive standpoint, the value of this skill comes from its high uptime and its synergy with supports. 3 turns of defense up on a 5-turn cooldown is a lot of damage mitigation over the course of a battle, which can be especially useful on a Berserker to nullify their inherent class disadvantage. The fact that it combos well with defensive buffs from common supports like Mosh and Waver means that, like Ibaraki, Kijyo has more tankiness than the average Zerker, and she can stick around for a little while longer. Offensively, the Star Absorb also gives her a good chunk of burst damage potential. Ideally, you should have this skill saved for a Buster Brave Chain, so that Kijyo can inflict the most amount of damage possible. But between this Star Absorb and her Noble Phantasm, Kijyo is capable of bursting down enemies very effectively. Kijyo even has a damage steroid in 9-headed Dragon's Fire. This skill buffs both her quick and buster cards by 30% and gives one ally an additional stage of overcharge. The additional overcharge can be situationally useful on some supports, or even on Kijyo herself for additional damage, but for the most part, the buster buff is the most important aspect of the skill. It gives a sizable buff not only to Kijyo's NP damage, but most of her deck as well. Finally, Kijyo does have some utility in Rope of Life, which heals the party, removes one debuff, and grants instant kill immunity. The heal and debuff removal serve to make Kijyo even more tanky, and they give her some viability in boss fights as a debuff clearer if needed. But on the whole, you should focus on damage first, so prioritize leveling the buster buff, followed by shapeshift, and then the heal last. For her append skills, you can just take mana loading and the extra card damage. Kijyo's Noble Phantasm is a single target buster attack that also increases her attack, but burns her as a demerit. Why they felt the need to add a demerit to this Noble Phantasm baffles me, but thankfully it's nothing serious and you can usually just ignore it, especially since Kijyo has a heal. The attack buff is actually pretty big, and Kijyo can increase her own overcharge stage, which can make it even slightly bigger. The reason why the attack buff is so good though is because it stacks with her buster buff, to essentially give Kijyo a 3-turn mana burst, which is kind of ridiculous on a berserker. Both buffs last for 3 turns, which means that not only does her NP hurt, but her face cards are also very strong. Buster Brave Change from Kijyo can be deceptively powerful despite her low attack. Unfortunately though, her triple buster deck prevents her from spamming this Noble Phantasm and stacking those attack buffs consistently. However, Kijyo can get a lot of NP charge from her arts card, so if you save her Star Absorb so that you can crit with the arts card, she can sometimes NP again on the following turn and stack 2 attack buffs. Like most berserkers, Kijyo can be a bully, and she is made to deal out as much damage as possible as quickly as possible. But unlike most berserkers, she also has the benefit of additional tankiness from her shapeshift and her heal. She has good staying power, especially if you pair her with supports who can give her hard defense like evasion or invincibility. And she can even work in some challenge quests due to her debuff removal. Unfortunately though, a lot of Kijyo's utility is negligible or underwhelming. A 2000 HP heal for example is fine, but it isn't really that much, especially on a 6-turn cooldown. And death immunity almost never comes into play, so it just feels like a wasted effect. If you're looking for Zerkers with high utility, then there are better ones out there, like Ibaraki and Nobu. And while Kijyo can be a big time damage dealer when her buffs are stacked correctly, her damage is middling prior to using her Noble Phantasm, which means she does have a bit of startup time before she gets rolling. And normally this wouldn't be an issue, but considering the fragility of her class, being able to deal maximum damage as quickly as possible is important. And there are far stronger damage dealers among the SR Berserkers. A lot of these weaknesses in Kijyo's gameplay come from a lack of fleshing out in her skill set. She has just enough to do a little bit of everything, but no singular niche where she can excel. For example, a Star Absorb skill, but no crit buffs. Healing and debuff removal, but at very low values and with no hard defense. Good damage buffs, but low attack and they're tied to her Noble Phantasm, etc, etc. It seems like for every advantage Kijyo has, there's a drawback. Don't get me wrong, Kijyo does have a lot to offer, but the lack of dedication in any one area means that she needs to depend on her teammates to fill in the gaps. So I highly recommend pairing her with allies who can offer her some good defense while also bolstering her damage. Servants like Mosh, Santa Nightingale, and Jean. Survivability is everything to Kijyo, so having supports who can keep her alive long enough to get her snowballing is ideal. Mosh, Jean, and Nightingale can do that by giving her hard and soft defensive buffs, as well as increasing her attack damage, or at least Jean will be able to once she gets her buff. Kijyo's Bond CE is Sound of the Imperial Court's Kodo. It increases the party's quick and buster card effectiveness by 10%, but it's not worth using at all on Kijyo since you primarily want to focus on CEs that can buff her buster cards, and preferably give her some NP charge, like Aerial Drive, Beautiful Dreamer, or Limited Zero. You can even go Black Grail as well if you really want to pump up her damage, since Kijyo's heal will mitigate the burn. Speaking of which, I recommend Phantasmal Princess once it releases, and not just for the art. It buffs damage by 60% when equipped to a berserker, so it's very strong. As for command codes, give Kijyo something that buffs buster crit damage, like Mistress of the Heavens, so that she can better utilize her Star Absorb. Overall, Kijyo is a strong berserker with good flexibility depending on what you want to use her for. She can be a surprisingly good damage dealer with a strong noble phantasm, she has good tankiness for her class which allows her to stick around in longer fights, and she even has some useful utility in the form of a debuff clear. However, when it comes to pure damage dealers, she doesn't quite stack up to the other berserkers like Beowulf and Jolter, and she doesn't have as much utility and defensive capabilities as Herc and Ibaraki. There's also a general lack of synergy in Kijyo's kit that prevents her from excelling in any one area. So all in all, she'll get a B- from me. She's still very usable if you can build the right team around her and compensate for some of her flaws, plus she is pretty strong once she gets going and NPs multiple times, but she does struggle to outperform other SR berserkers. And those are my thoughts on Kijyo. I wouldn't mind seeing a buff or two thrown her way if we ever get a rerun of this event, because she does have potential, and the concept of a Dino Waifu is just too good to not make her top tier. Do it, Lisangle. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over on Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter, all linked in the description down below. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. So Brony out. Later.